Hello everyone and welcome to another very nice game, also from the Sousse Interzonal tournament of 1967, Bobby Fischer versus Samuel Reshevsky. Now this is a game from round 11 and information about this event is fairly scarce, but I will deliver the full story after I check out a couple of games from the event as, there are conflicting stories, there's a lot to talk about, and I'm sure you guys would appreciate to have your vast knowledge improved. So yeah, Robbie Fischer versus his old opponent Samuel Reshevsky, a legend in his own right. He was 56 at the time, maybe even 57 at the time this game was played. Up until this point, he defeated Bobby Fischer 3 times. That's a feat few can boast. He defeated him in the first ever game that they played. Also defeated him in a match, not in a match, but he defeated him in one game in the match that they played in 1961. The match was cancelled, but he did have the one victory. And also, Reshevsky defeated Fischer in the 1965 U.S. Chess Championship. But that was 1965. This is 1967, and as closer and closer we get to that 1967, 1968, 1969, 1970, we are reaching the point of that Bobby Fischer that was simply unstoppable. That could play 3 events at a rating performance of maybe 3,000, maybe even 3,100, maybe even 3,200. It's hard to say. But yeah, definitely one of the games that we should show. Round 11 versus Samuel Reshevsky. Let's check it out. So Fischer with white opens with pawn to e4. Now, one thing that we should mention is that Fischer already left Sousse for the Tunis airport, and I don't think he made it all the way because it's some 333 kilometers to Sousse airport from to Tunis airport from Sousse. That's some 200 miles, and you do have 1 hour after your clock has started, and Fischer's clock has been started without him actually being at the board. So it is said that he returned from wherever he was. He probably started going to the airport but didn't get there all the way. He returned and he still had 10 minutes to make his first move, and he said in front of the tournament door that he does not need the full time to defeat Reshevsky, that he will wait 5 more minutes, and only then he walked through the door and then he played his pawn to e4 move and pressed the clock. And it is said, someone said, I can't remember who, that it was in a book by someone. Someone wrote a book about this, and they said that Reshevsky, it was the same as if dead Alechin had walked through the door, seeing Fischer return to the tournament like this after he already announced that he was leaving the tournament for maybe like the 10th time. But okay, Fischer does play pawn to e4, and Reshevsky replies with pawn to e5. Now, they said that, many grandmasters agreed on this, that since Fischer had very little time on the clock upon returning to the event, Reshevsky should have played something that he knows Fischer never studied. But instead, Reshevsky also, I guess, a bit stubborn and also trying to prove a point here that he was Fischer's equal, played right into Fischer's hands into the main line of the Ruy Lopez. So, okay, we have knight to f3, knight to c6, bishop to b5, pawn to a6, Morphy's defense. We have bishop to a4 and knight to f6. We have castles, bishop to e7, rook to e1, and pawn to b5. So much like you would have in a modern game. Bishop b3, we have castle, c3, and pawn to d6. And Fischer plays pawn to h3, pawn to h6, and finally striking in the center with pawn to d4. We have rook to e8, knight b to d2, and bishop to f8. So we're not analyzing any of this, as there are thousands and thousands of games even today with this exact same setup. Even with the arrival of engines, the line is still very, very much playable. We have knight to f1, bishop to d7, and now knight to g3. We have knight to a5 going after the bishop, and bishop to c2. We have pawn to c5 and pawn to b3. Knight back to c6, and bishop to e3. Nowadays, d5 is a bit more popular as it is the top move recommended by the engine. Fischer prefers bishop to e3, c captures, and now knight to b4. So, much like in the previous game, Fischer retreats to the bishop to b1 with his bishop. He will kick away the knight, and then he will reactivate the bishop. We have pawn to a5, pawn to a3, knight back to a6. We have bishop to d3, putting pressure on the pawn, preparing queen to e2 to put more pressure on the b5 pawn, and also black is expected to bring the queen to c7 to b7 and then to put pressure on that e4 pawn. At some point black will try to capture on d4 and then capitalize on e4, but on the other hand, if black does this, then he will be left with the weak d6 pawn. So you have to figure out how to go about this properly. Queen to c7, we have queen to e2, and queen to b7 with some pressure on that e4 pawn, like we mentioned, and Fischer goes rook 8 to d1. You could also play rook 8 to c1. It's, you know, matter of a personal preference, I would say. So rook to d1, we have pawn to g6. We maybe perhaps weakening the position too much unnecessarily, and queen to b2. Now Fischer puts pressure on the e5 pawn, and the knight on f6 is also undefended, so you have to take that into consideration. And okay, let's say you play something like bishop g7. It seems, I mean, it does make some sense with the queen on b2, but the problem is if you play d captures, and knight captures, you don't have any tricky discoveries like knight captures on e4. Yes, you open up an attack on e5, but Fischer would capture on e4 and have an attack on b7, so that doesn't work. So the best you would have is knight to g4, go for this discovery, but Fischer would even be happy with something like this. Captures, queen e2, and even with the tripled pawns here, the white's position is still winning. So Reshevsky moves the queen back, queen to b8, just adds more defense to the e5 pawn, and bishop back to b1, as we've discussed, and now king to h7. Here bishop to g7 was a little bit better. Reshevsky played king to h7, and now Fischer goes for it. D captures on e5, and probably also this king to h7 move, one of the reasons Reshevsky played it was because Fischer arrived with 5 minutes on the clock, and Reshevsky was just extremely annoyed by that. So D captures on e5, Fischer accepts the exchange sacrifice, D captures, and knight captures, and now rook captures on e5. You could also capture with the queen, but bishop to d4, and then the knight on f6 is lost, so that doesn't work. So rook captures on e5, and now bishop to f4, nicely attacking the rook. If the rook moves, of course, the queen on b8 will be lost. So queen b7, and now Fischer takes back material. Bishop captures on e5, and knight to e8. So this is the position. Reshevsky can be very happy, but yeah, he didn't really do all that much this game. We have knight to e2, knight to c5, and now knight to f4. We have pawn to b4, pawn to a4, and the bishop to c6. So putting a lot of pressure on Fischer's e4 pawn, but just knight to d5. We have knight to d7, attacking the bishop, and bishop to d4. And now, while you can capture on d5, you have to give up even more material, so that will not work. So that's why knight to g7, we have bishop to d3, and now knight to e6, putting pressure on the dark square bishop, and now bishop to c4. Fischer not worried about knight captures on d4 as, well, you could play it, but queen captures on d4. Again, this f6 square will be a little bit weak, and if you further capture, then bishop captures. Remember, it's Fischer who's up material, so Reshevsky can't just trade pieces. So rook to e8, and now we have bishop to f6. The bishop's safe here, as if you trade, then captures with check will eliminate the rook on e8. So knight e to c5 and queen to c2. We have knight back to e6, and now bishop back all the way to a1. It's unlikely that you will be able to use this diagonal. Of course, Reshevsky always has bishop to g7, but the bishop is safe for the moment. We have queen to a7 and king to h1. Not allowing any pressure to be put on that f2 pawn. Bishop to g7 offering a trade, and Fischer goes for it. Bishop captures, knight captures, and bishop to b5 now. Just forcing further trade. We have bishop captures, pawn captures, rook to b8, and now queen to c6. Just mounting the pressure, and with Fischer still being up material, there is very little Reshevsky can do here. Knight to e8, pawn to e5, and now knight to f8. We have knight to f6 with check. Idea being that now, if the king moves, the knight on e8 hangs. If not, if you capture, then the pawn will capture on f6, and this will create an outpost for the rook on e7. effectively ending the game. So knight captures, e captures, now rook to b6, and here is where the game actually ended. The game was adjourned in this position, but as you know, Fischer forced Reshevsky to wait for him at the beginning of the game. So did Reshevsky force Fischer to wait for him after the adjournment of the game, since Reshevsky did not come to continue the game. This was the coveted move, and the point is here you just resign, because after, well, many moves are possible, but just queen to e8, and that's pretty much it. Now rook to e7 is coming. If you prevent this, if you play rook to b8 to also defend the knight here, then you will play queen to e7, and now you can no longer go back because queen captures followed by checkmate, and if queen captures on e7, f captures on e7, and that's it. The knight is trapped, you're getting a queen into the game, the rook will have to give itself up. I mean, whatever you play, that doesn't really matter. I mean, rook e8 can even be met with rook to d8. You can play whatever you want here. I mean, it's pointless. And someone asked in the previous video, when was the last adjournment, or rather, when was the last tournament where adjournment was possible? Adjournment means that the position is left as it is and will be continued tomorrow, or maybe even after 2 days. So players would have additional chances of analyzing. Players who had an entire team behind them had better chances of finding better moves. As, for example, if you imagine Karpov had an adjourned game, he would have an entire team of Soviet grandmasters looking for poison in the position for him. And if you were Fischer, you would do it all by yourself. So, you know, it definitely helped having a team. The problem was the chess engines started appearing, and I believe the last game, the last tournament or the last match where adjournment was used was in 1996. It was in a 1996 match. I believe Nigel Short played that one. Nigel Short versus Gata Kamsky. I believe that's the last time that the adjournment was used. But the first time that it wasn't used was in 1995 during the. It was the. Well, this was the FIDE World Chess Championship match. This was the Classical World Chess Championship match between Kasparov and Anand in New York. So that was the first time that adjournment was not allowed, and in 1996 in the match was the last time that it was effectively used. And already then you had Deep Blue, you know, surfaced in 1997. Everyone, you know, understood that chess engines are here. We can no longer, you know, just to guess, okay, maybe this person has access to an engine, maybe this person doesn't, because I mean Deep Blue did beat Kasparov, so if you had that to help you with your adjournment game, your opponent would be in big trouble, you know, next day that he appeared. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it and a little bit of extra info. Like I said, we're going to cover a few more games. I'm not sure if I'm going to cover all of them, but I will cover the nicer ones. And then I will give you the exact timeline of the events that occurred in the Sousse Interzonal tournament of 1967 to increase your vast knowledge as you guys deserve it. So yeah, that's the game. Hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Eric Keith McAllister, MB Reed, Kristen Janet, Jack Obeid, and Adam Simmons for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world. So thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day. And yeah, the quote above the board is something that Reshevsky supposedly said after the game. But yeah, like I said, I will give you the entire timeline at the end of this short series. See you soon.